What has it been? 2 or 3 years since you've been here?
It's it's gotta be. I think it's 3. I think it is
Yeah.
because we were just gonna do one, and then pandemic.
Everything shut down. So, Jeri, for any of you that don't know, was a regular figure here. It was wonderful.
This is my regular figure.
And she also moves half her house here every time she does. I love her containers, except she told me how heavy it was. I decided I don't do that. But my table has never been large enough for all of her displays, which is a joy. When she did her other series, name it.
Crispin Guest Medieval Noir series.
Yes. She would just have some of the most fantastic things.
Swords.
And knowing when this was set, I wasn't sure what she was going to bring, and it's been illuminating. Some handmade, some found. We'll hear all about that. But my biggest point is to welcome Jeri back to Book Carnival and hope this continues. Yay. And the show is now yours.
Oh, good. Thank you so much, Anne. And thank all of you for coming. Oh my gosh, it has been so long, and it's kind of good to get back in the saddle again. And I had to relearn how to do all my tech because I haven't plugged these things in for 3 years. So, yay, it works. I'm so surprised. But thanks for coming, and thanks for sharing this launch. And I was supposed to talk to the microphone, and but I'm so loud. But the mic, the tech needs the mic. So Crispin Guest Series that ended with book 15, and I was thinking several years ahead of time before it ended, what was I gonna do next? And I have been thinking a long time, a strangely long time, about a series with Will Sommers, who is the real court jester of Henry VIII. And because people love the Tudors, boy do they love the Tudors, and I thought, well, if I set a book in that period, that should be a good follow-up to Crispin. It's a thing that people can really get behind, and it's about a little over almost 200 years later than Crispin, so Tudor period.
So no crossover.
There will be no crossover. No, Crispin will not show up as a ghost or anything else.
Darn.
But they did love their ghosts. This is a Tudor series, and I wanted to do something with Will Sommers, and of course I write mysteries, so he has to be the sleuth. And who better than the court jester, because he can go everywhere at court. He knows everything. He hears everything, and so and he can go anywhere and detect things. So an amateur sleuth. He has not hired himself out. He's too busy being Henry VIII's court jester. And we will talk about the history of jesters. And because I want you to kind of understand that background. And we'll talk about the Tudor period, and we'll talk about everything. How long do you want to stay? That's the question. So let's first talk about the jesters. Who were the jesters? What were their lives like? What did they do? Well, as for what did they do, there was a fool named Roland Le Poitou, who was given 30 acres of land by King Henry II. That's in the late 1100s. When the fool retired, on condition that Roland returned to court every Christmas Day to leap, whistle, and fart. Talk about job security, okay? So European jesters were sometimes objects of ridicule to be laughed at. Many were mentally challenged or little people, my stature, but some were wits and challenged the monarch and the court to think, speaking truth to power. In an 18th century book about Will Sommers, I did a lot of research, but this one was one of those iffy ones. It was from the 18th century. The author described fools thus. Some were fools by nature, such as we'll call mere naturals or idiots. Others by cunning and crafty fools, who when they cannot thrive by their wisdom seek to live by their folly. Just like me. So you might have heard the term pratfalls. That's something that is a word that's used today, but it was for us from something along these lines here, late Middle Ages, this is late Middle Ages. A prat is your backside, your butt. So when you have a pratfall, you literally are falling on your ass, making a fool of yourself. So that's something we still use today, and you can think about that the next time somebody takes a fall for a joke. Now, this is supposed to be a depiction of a fellow named Le Trébolet. His real name was Nicolas Ferrial, and in the 16th century he was jester to King Louis XII and Francis I of France. Now, he had a little run-in there with old Louis. The jester is joking with the king all the time, but he came up behind him at one moment and slapped him on the butt, right on the prat. And the king turned around, took him by surprise, and he just was looking at his jester. And he says, "Why did you do that?" And the jester said, "Oh, sorry, I thought you were the queen." So that got Louis even madder, and he says, "You're not allowed to insult the queen. I'm sentencing you to death. But I will let you choose your form of execution." And La Trébolet said, "Of old age." So that made Louis laugh, and he pardoned him, and all was well. But Victor Hugo's Le Roi s'amuse and Rigoletto were both based on that guy. Now, maybe this is your idea of jesters. This is from one of my favorite all-time films. This is from The Court Jester with Danny Kaye, and that's him, singing all those songs about, a jester, a funny idea, a jester. And it's a lot of fun. If you haven't seen it, go find it and watch it. It's a musical, so there's a lot of fun songs, and not one bit of historical accuracies. Enjoy it for what it is, okay? I think it's from 1950-something, 53 maybe. But in ancient Rome, jesters go way back. So in ancient Rome we have jesters. They were called ballatrones, paid entertainers. The Aztecs had jesters. There was a conquistador named Bernal Diaz de Castillo who wrote in his The Conquest of New Spain about the Aztecs. Sometimes some little humpbacked dwarfs would be present at his meals, the king's meals, whose bodies seemed almost to be broken in the middle. These were his jesters. And in the Hopi tradition, you have these guys right here. I don't need my laser pointer. I can point with laser accuracy. These are the sacred clowns. And they were a combination of jester, priest, and shaman. And it was their job to speak truth to power, and also to their little stories and jokes were little life lessons. So they were very important to the tribe, and they dressed like that all the time. So they were in different garb, so somebody can identify who they were from the other people. The Chinese employed cultural equivalents to the jester, those who would do jokes and other entertainments, and I'll tell you about that a little later. And this, I don't know if you can see this or not, but he's saying too soon, because one of the things he's juggling is the king's head. So jesters were often employed to break bad news to the sovereign. So there's that. Now, these are the various kinds of jesters you would expect to see in medieval and Renaissance Europe. And these are the ones you're all familiar with, I'm sure. And they're wearing party-colored clothing. You can see party-colored is opposite. That's a party. And bells, they're wearing bells, so they look very different from everybody else at court, even though people at court at these times were wearing similar things, the tights and the hose and the stockings and the different hoods. But this is what our idea of a jester. And they always came from lower classes, which gave them a definite different perspective on life. They knew what to talk about when they were doing their jokes and rhymes. They lived in the households of their masters, not just the court, not just the king. If you were rich enough, you could have your home jester. So it was sort of like having a comedian streaming live all the time. So you'd have that. And some would be living in quite lavish digs with their own rooms and all that, but some were treated like servants and had to find any place they could to sleep at court, just like a servant. So they made jokes, tumbled, offered riddles and rhymes, played instruments, performed puppet shows, and juggled, the better ones anyway, because the more things you could do, well, then you were in less competition with other entertainers who came to court. So you wanted job security. And so they would stick close to their monarchs, or their masters were allowed to mock them publicly, which was some of the things that was not possible if you were any other courtier there at court. The jester gets to call the king by their first name. He calls him uncle, and all of these things is very intimate, really, this relationship. So this is Will Summers, the real guy. And I want you to look at his clothing. They are not party colored. They are not, there's no bells on them. Now, I think at first he probably did have bells, and he did look like a jester when he first came to court, but as he became closer and closer to the monarch, I think he saw that he was able to shed some of that motley. That's what motley is. And just look like a regular servant, high servant at court. And so that means that he had to be some kind of special guy. And that's what really attracted me. I mean, I knew about him since I was 10 years old, because I was a nerd. So you could see that he's been in many portraits. He's not the best looking of guys, but what the heck? He was funny and witty. He could pull up a rhyme like that off the cuff. He was the rapper of his day. So you could see he's always in the background, very distant. But there's no portrait of him extant, of just sitting there. But he's always way in the background, and especially this one, he's way in the background of this big portrait. And he's got a monkey. So that monkey will show up in later books. He's behind this is Henry's shoulder right here. He's behind him, so he's ready to give him one of those rabbit ears, I'm sure. And this is a psalter that Henry himself commissioned. And Henry is kind of old here. You can see he's got white hair. And there's Will. He's still there. In fact, Will stayed at this court, through Henry's successor, his son Edward VI. He stayed through Mary I, and he stayed through Elizabeth I's reign and retired during hers. So he left his family behind and would never see them again when he came to court. And so Henry's family became his family. Henry was married to Catherine of Aragon for 24 years. And so Mary was about 12 or 13 or so when all of this great matter, this divorce stuff, started to happen. But she was part of the little family, and Will was part of that too, and he'd play music for them and joke around, and he loved the kids. And when a new wife showed up and a new kid, he was part of that family, and so on until that stopped. But so he had to have been a very special, very witty, and a kind individual that the family loved as much as he loved them. And that's sort of the stuff that I wanted to talk about, and I will talk further about that as we go along. Now, this next one, portraits painted. This is Velázquez painted portraits of several of the 110 dwarves on King Philip IV of Spain's payroll. And that's this one here. And Van Dyck paired English Queen Henrietta Maria in the mid-1600s with her trusted dwarf, Sir Geoffrey Hudson, also known as Lord Minimus. Mini-me. That's what he was. And he was said to have been only 18 inches tall and to have made his debut at court popping out of a pie. Ironically, that's what I did. Anyway, court jesters also appear in paintings by Rubens, Vasari, Veronese, and Botticelli.
Hey, Jerry?
Yes.
I'm sorry, the name of Lord Minimus again?
His real name?
Yes.
It was Sir Geoffrey Hudson.
I had a close-up on a look in his face. He looks like Peter Dinklage.
Well, this guy does too, because this is Minimus there. But yeah,
Wow.
he does. And so there we are of those guys. So though jesters were usually treated as amusing oddities, and in the case of a Chinese emperor's court, possibly even sexual playthings, yikes, many others were cherished and indulged. And that's why they had a lot of the mentally challenged folks at court as jesters. It was not really just to laugh at them. They were considered guileless. They were innocents that they didn't have because of their mental challenges. They didn't have the meanness, the evil qualities in them that everybody else had. So they cherished them and they took care of them. So it was actually a good job to have. And you did all kinds of silly things and dressed up and, juggled, and that was great entertainment. This is the Middle Ages. It was great entertainment. So in the golden age of European jesters, that covered 500 years, beginning in the 12th century. Scholars have identified 68 individual fools in the court of Spain, 57 in France, 45 in England, not including Ireland and Scotland, 23 in Italy, 19 in Germany, and even a few in Iceland. Forget Norway, they're so austere there, they have no jesters. But China, by contrast, they had a 2,000-year jester tradition that began somewhere between 770 and 476 BCE. We tend to think a lot, we're very Eurocentric here in this country, and we forget other people had cultures that lasted a long time, far before ours, so that's them. So it became the end of a tradition, and this is something you would see in the Danny Kaye movie. An unemployed jester is nobody's fool. After the Restoration in the 1600s, King Charles II of England did not reinstate the tradition of jesters. Now remember, before him, Oliver Cromwell took over England as the protector, and he executed Charles I, his father, and he got rid of Christmas, and he got rid of theaters, and he got rid of music and dancing, none of that stuff. So when Charles was reinstated, he liked that stuff. And he brought back theater and music. And in fact, theater finally had women as actresses. In Shakespeare's day, all the women parts were played by men. So we finally have women on the stage. But one of his favorite actors was one who was a comedian. And he wasn't a jester, but he was sort of thought of as a jester, I guess, by at least Samuel Pepys in his famous diary. He calls Killigrew, his name is Thomas Killigrew, the king's fool and jester with the power to mock and revile even the most prominent without penalty. So that was a tradition that faded away. Now we have that tradition as comedians, stand-up comics that we have now. And now we have this book that I have written. Takes advantage of the fool's special station in life. Now, I have here, see if I can get this. This is one of my pandemic projects. The doll was a blank when I bought it. I bought it from a lady in Ukraine just as the war in Ukraine began, and I thought, well, I'll never see that. I'll have to make one myself or something. But she came through. It did arrive. She made it. And so I painted it. And I was smarty pants me. I thought, oh, well, I will sew his clothing. I soon discovered I didn't really know how to sew that well. And these big old sausage fingers of mine could not make small things very well at all. So if you come up here, you could see that I painted his clothes. I painted his clothes on him. He's got his codpiece painted, and so you could see how the clothes were. And then a wonderful person volunteered to do the coat and the jester hood. Now, so Will Summers, as you saw in the pictures, he would be dressed like this, just so he could do his something. Sometimes he didn't wear the coat at all. Sometimes he just wore the doublet underneath, and that has long sleeves, so you could see. Sleeves continue, and the hose. In Crispin's time, you just had the hose, the legs, and they were tied to your underwear, which you wouldn't see because you had a long tunic. But now you have your doublet. You can't see this, but you can come up and see it. The doublet, the hose, this is now tied to your doublet. This is the early suspenders. So you tied that there, and that's why you have an escape hatch with your codpiece. So you untied that, because the whole rest of it would have to be untied. And sometimes he would go around just dressed in the doublet and hose. That was perfectly acceptable, to tumble around in and make a fool of yourself. So he did that. Are there any questions right now? If anything that we talked about here, the history and some of the Tudor stuff. Should we talk about some of the Tudor stuff? I have this French hood up here that I got on Etsy. Somebody made that for me because I learned my lesson about sewing. So it's complicated because buckram, wires, all that stuff is in there, and then all this other stuff. So women always covered their hair. They covered their hair for centuries. And you only uncovered it to go to bed. Sometimes you would still cover it to keep it from getting all tangled. But that came down. It was about where my jester head is. Started there, and it came down all around your ears. So the only parts of your hair you would see right here in the front, part of the middle. That was it. It wasn't until the Renaissance was in full swing and you'd see that in Italian paintings. Because the Renaissance was everywhere else first. It was in the warmer climes first before it hit England. King Henry VIII is the guy on the cusp. He's got 1 foot in the Middle Ages and 1 foot in the Renaissance. He was the first sort of Renaissance-y king, and the culmination would be Elizabeth, of course. So, didn't see the hair there, but things change, fashion change. The French hood, Anne Boleyn pretty much kind of brought the French hood fashionable because she was raised in France and she loved their styles, and so she brought a lot of that. After she was executed, they kind of went out of style. It's like, oh, let's get rid of that. We don't want to lose our heads either. So that was her. Now, I'm going to do a little reading too. One of the things that I really liked about this book, number one, is in first person. So Will tells his own story. And if you are familiar at all with my books, you know that I like the people and their story is usually more than the mystery. But there's a mystery. There's always going to be a mystery. So I've read some reviews and people go, what's all this about these people and the characters? Where's the mystery? Well, then don't read my books anymore because they're not going to change. Because I'm immersing you into this time period. People love this time period, but it's like anything else. They love it, but they really don't know that much about it. And please don't get your information from TV shows like The Tudors. I don't know what I'm going to say about that. Best not to say anything at all if you can't say something nice. Needless to say, it's got as much historical accuracy as the Court Jester movie with Danny Kaye. So just don't take any of that as actual fact. But, so it's complicated. I mean, what was with Henry? I think that's everybody's question. What the heck's with you? And it wasn't that he was more vicious than any other medieval monarch. He wasn't. He was kind of a lightweight, really, even though there were lots of executions. Okay? Don't get me wrong. And he treated his wives badly. He treated them badly when they weren't his wives, or they weren't gonna be his wives anymore, and, and how he got them to be not his wives anymore was bad. Excuse me. So, so Henry kind of had this bad reputation. I mean, there was nobody else in Europe, and you know, the rest of Europe was watching this and going, "How many times is this guy gonna get married? What is going on over there in England? What is in the water over there?" So that was unusual, and that's why he's memorable. It's all of the wives, 6 of them. I know people think it's 8, but he's Henry the 8th, and he had 6 wives. Hence the shirt tells you who they are and what happened. So I thought that Henry could use a little rehabilitation, and I'm not changing any facts here. You just have a different view of Henry through Will's eyes, and remember that he thinks of Henry as part of his family, and so he doesn't like what he's doing, and he's trying to change his mind about things any way he can, but he's Henry's got his own mind, and so Will does his best, but he still loves him. He'll love him the most. And that's kind of where we start his little tale. There's in this little bit here that I'm going to read, Henry takes Will on a hunt, and he did take him on hunts. It's not Will's favorite thing to do, but he does take them out, and he rides away. He and Will ride away from everybody else, and because Henry wants to get some breathing room. The great matter is just beginning, and he just tired of all the counselors talking to him, so he takes Will out into the country by himself, and they have a little tete-a-tete. We rode up a rise, and suddenly had a magnificent view of a patchwork of farms, with their hedgerows between them, and acres of forest before it. "It's a good land, isn't it, this England of ours?" said Henry, admiring the view, proud of his kingdom. "It is that, uncle, a beautiful thing, and up here there are no cares, no worries." "No, there aren't." I turned to him then, studying that profile. 37 years old, 14 years my senior, and not a grey hair on him. No wonder he looked on me as a son. The son he did not have, but hoped to get from Nan Bullen. You're thinking deep thoughts, uncle. That I am, Will. Do you wish to unburden yourself? He turned his gaze on mine. There was amusement in his eyes. A man who takes advice from a fool is that much of a fool himself, I finished for him, and yet you quote well your own fool. Because my fool often has better advice than my counsellors. He glanced behind him, just to make sure none of them were nigh, and shook his head in weariness. How I wish I were a yeoman farmer. Then do it, Harry. Steal away from this rabble. Sell the jewels on your doublet, for there are many, and buy a patch down there. That one, or perhaps that one. Be free of the cares of state once and for all. Don't tempt me, Summers. Tell me your troubles then, your grace. You know I'm yours. Your grace? You never speak to me thus. I shrugged. I forget myself. Tell me your troubles, Harry, and I will tell you to take 6pence and throw it to the crows. They know everything anyway, and will give you their instruction. 6pence to the crows? What babble is this? If you will not babble to me, I will babble to you. He smiled fondly at me before he turned his mount in front of me and rode back into the wood. He slowed the horse's trot and walked him, listening to the bird calls, the red squirrels in the trees, the badgers in the bracken. All the forest was alive in the colours of autumn, golds, yellows, oranges, and reds. Like a royal cloak it was, magnificent in its textures and patterns. In the shade, a chill breeze moved our hair, and he suddenly stilled. He seemed to sense something. He knew. He was of a sudden the wild man of the woods, the spirit of the forest, face made of oak leaves and acorns. and he knew, without yet seeing it, that a deer was nigh. He carefully took the bow from his shoulder and grasped an arrow from his quiver on the saddle. I listened with all my might, and I could not do it, could not discern deer from squirrel, but from the thicket, not more than 10 yards hence, a buck with its crown of antlers emerged like a great pagan god. He did not look at us, for the wind was with us, taking our scent far from him. Henry, with arrow nocked and the bowstring drawn back to his cheek, took aim. "No, Harry," I said softly, "let it be." He aimed still with a steady hand and spoke softly. "Do you not favour venison?" "I do, sir, but just for today. Let us not think of this creature as our meat. Let us merely enjoy his nobility." Henry hesitated, watching just as I was, as the hart picked his way over the fern, wide ears turning in search of an enemy. He raised his head, and like any king, slowly perused his court, the shadows, the oaks, the fern, and even the red squirrels. It seemed that all should bow to this creature who appeared to own it all. It could be that Henry had last recognized his king in this deer, for slowly he released the string and lowered the bow. "You are a most unusual man, Summers." "Aye, and that's why you love me." "What were you like as a child, I wonder?" "Much the same as I am now, uncle, only shorter." He chuckled, and as we watched as the deer ate his fill of moss unmolested, "It is a noble creature," he acknowledged. "Yes, sire." After a long time of watching, the deer disappeared at last into the shadows, and I wondered if it were not some wild forest spirit, instead of a creature of flesh and blood. I followed Henry's and moved his mount forward in the opposite direction of the deer. "No one has ever told me no like you do." "I must. Now that deer will be grateful, and may grant you a boon some day." "The fantasies you weave." "It could be magical creature, like a nymph or fairy in disguise. Oh, you mustn't laugh, Harry, for one never knows. Don't you ever daydream of such? Have you ever climbed a hill and lain upon the grass and simply looked up to the clouds and saw, oh, such things as you could see in them? But when we had a view of the plains and the sky, we could see mountains of clouds hanging like drapery in the blue heavens." "Don't be absurd. Never was I so idle. My tutors would have whipped me." "Whipped you? A tutor striking a tutor?" He laughed, and then that laugh dimmed, and a shadow crossed his brow as he lowered his face. His gloved fingers, shod in glinting rings, stroked his beard. "If you will recall, I was not the heir, until I suddenly was." He crossed himself, and I followed suit. We were both thinking of that older brother of his, Arthur, who should have been king, and who had first been wed to Henry's current wife. My poor Harry, lying on the grass. Did you ever do such things? Do men do such? "Oh, aye, sire, the common man does." "Let's go now. Forget the hunt. Come away with me and be idle for a time. Become a yeoman farmer, lie upon the grass, look at clouds of all things. What notions you have this day, Summers! Besides, a king is not at liberty to be idle. His people would see that as slothful, and a king must not be that." "But a king was needed most, eh? Lay aside your bow. Come with me." I could almost see it in his eyes, his working it through. Could he? Would he? Even for an hour? But it seemed that the notion of it disappeared like smoke, just as suddenly as it had appeared. "What a tempter you are! Are you the devil or a jester?" I suddenly felt saddened for him, for he could never truly be a man like his subjects. For all the gold and comforts of his life, there was the other side of that coin, one of cares and sorrows and selfishness and state. No, sire. I'm just a man. A man who had time to be idle and watch the clouds. That's it for that. Yay, thank you. Thank you. So, yeah, so I'm basically writing a historical novel with a mystery in it, interrupting it. So I hope you will like that. And if there are no other questions, then we will start the raffle. Hold on. Oh, I can't get out of this chair. All right. You shall go for the t-shirt. The t-shirt first. And it's the last three numbers. Hope you still have your tickets. Last three numbers. 707. Who has that? Woohoo! You got a t-shirt. Come and get your t-shirt. If I had a t-shirt cannon, I'd shoot it at you. Here she comes. Here she comes. It's one duck and one headband left if you want. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Good for you. Okay, now the mug. The mug so you can mug around. Last three numbers. 704. There you go. You win, sir. You win. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, my new drinking mug. Thank you.
Everybody wins. Everybody wins. So if there aren't any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. Oh, let me talk about the next series.
Yeah.
In 6 months, in June, I've got a second series coming out. And it is a Sherlockian series. I hope you like that. Sherlock Holmes kinds of pastiches. This one, the series is called An Irregular Detective Mystery. Because it's about one of Sherlock Holmes' original Baker Street irregulars, all grown up, and he has the chutzpah to open up his own detective agency. With mixed results. So, he and his partner open this agency. The first book is The Isolated Seance. There's already pre-orders out there for it. And I've got a couple of bookmarks here. So you might want to grab that. But if you're signed up for my newsletter, you will hear about this till you're so tired of it. You want to just buy it to shut me up. So, but anyway, so that's happening in June. So hopefully I'll be back here with Anne and be talking to you guys about that too. And I have some really neat stuff for display. I'm already buying all that stuff. I know. Could you please? So Sherlock Holmes pastiches again. That's people love Sherlock Holmes and never get tired of him. And there's lots of books out there. And I was just looking at this one it's from Nicholas Meyer, who gave us a 7% solution so many years ago. But people are writing them all the time, and I thought, why not me? I know about Sherlock Holmes, at least a little. And when I researched it, I knew more. So,
what fascinates me is your research.
Yes, I mean...
It's not easy, and you pick the darndest times for research.
Well, anytime you're writing a historical, and by the way, the Historical Novel Society considers a historical book that's set 50 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm historical. Some of you are historical. Which is hysterical. So somebody had to make a line, they had to draw a line. So 50 years is what it is. And so that's a fun thing. So the Victorian period is as contemporary as I'm gonna get. Okay. Unless you want my paranormals.
I was gonna say.
The paranormals are contemporary, so the werewolf mystery and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But for historicals, and it's just the research. I had a hard time getting into the research of this. I don't know why. I was stuck, and it took me a while to sort of it's like starting a car that won't start. It's too cold. Finally got started in the Tudor period because I knew a lot about this period anyway. But it was the minutia, and it was all the politics and all. So I've whittled all that politics down to something that you guys are nice, bite-sized chunks, so you can swallow it. The rest of us. because there's a lot of interesting things. And of course, most of the people in these books are real people, including the yeomans of the guards. I have names of those guys, so there's names all over the place. But there are fictional people, okay? There's a lot of fictional people who die in this series, let's put it that way. Can't kill off people that didn't get killed off, so there's that. But, so everybody is acting the way they would have acted, and many times said the things they said. And a lot of the jokes that I have in here are real medieval jokes. Some are not. Some I made up. So now you get to look through it and pick out which ones you think I made up and are real. And that might be more difficult than you think.
But does that mean 2 books a year, Jeri?
Yeah, it does. Yikes. No, well, obviously I've already got the second one written of this one. Okay. So that I have that yet to turn in. First one of this one is done, obviously. I'm writing the second. And so when I get new contracts for the other ones, then I'll read more. But this will probably be a 6-book series.
Ooh.
And this one will, one for each wife. And this one may go on for a while, but no, I'm never writing a 15-book series again. Because that's just...
Loved it, so.
I know. But I always get new ideas, and then I decide, I'm not going to do that.
Okay.
But we'll see. We'll see. So...
It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Now buy books, and I will sign them. Blank. And ironically, it came from a gal in Ukraine just as the war had started.
Oh my goodness.
And I thought, oh, well, I'll never get that one. So I best make another one. But she came through. It came through. So I thought I would sew the clothes. No, I was not good at that. So I painted them. So they're all painted on. But I did have somebody, very nice lady who was very good, make the little coat and the little hat. And so the rest is... And of course, we always have giveaways. One is a t-shirt like this.
Uh-huh.
This is a little ditty that probably started in the late, early 20th century.
You going to do a raffle? Or
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'll get some tickets for you.
So divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived is how you remember Henry VIII's wives. See if this still works. It's alive.
Atmosphere.
Yes. Doesn't it feel atmospheric already?
I love
Very
that card.
Should we wait about 5 more minutes?
Got it. Caught me there. Oh, I like that. Perfect.
I'm Jewish, but I'm a ham. So how does that work? I don't know. How does that work?
Oh, shit. Yeah,
It's a kosher ham.
Yeah.
My glasses are up there, and I was like, no, my glasses are on.
Yeah. Oh, I like that shirt. I'm reading it.
Yes, you can win that shirt. Part of the raffle.
All right.
The shirt and the mug.
All right.
And there is mead back there, too. She has kindly supplied some, Anne's kindly supplied some cookies, but I brought a bottle of mead.
They had some friends of mine tell me there apparently there's like a place down in San Diego that they make mead.
There's a lot more meaderies now.
Yeah.
My husband was way ahead of the curve, and it was all me. Because I asked him to make it. And he says,
Right.
well, all right. He was a home brewer.
Uh-huh.
And you brew mead. It's really not wine. It's really brewed like beer.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I would like some medieval something to sip while I'm writing. And he says, I will make some. And he made it, and he started winning awards for it.
Oh, nice.
So best of show several times at the San Diego County Fair.
Oh.
They're at Santa Anita or whatever that. No, it's not Santa Anita.
Del Mar.
It's,
Del
Del
Mar.
Mar. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I know all the horse races at. Why is that?
For your next novel.
I'll talk about my next novel. It's no horse racing, but you never know. A horse racing could happen.
Well, with the number of series you have
series.
here, it's going to be like, okay, in this series,
I'm branching out. I am branching out a little bit, so we'll see. Well, I've been branching, I
I
guess.
was going to say you had
I'm a whole tree now.
Yeah, the supernatural stuff, and then
Yeah.
we have the
Yeah.
steampunk.
The LGBTQ stuff.
Yep, you got that. So, oh yeah, that's the irregulars
There-
that you're
yeah.
doing the new series coming out. Yeah.
Come on down. Get yourself a raffle ticket for the T-shirt or the mug. Free. Just make sure you keep one of the tickets.
Did you have those decks made?
No. I know where to get all those things. And that's why, and they are Mardi Gras ducks, really. But I said, that's the only jester duck I could find, so that worked. It worked.
That's funny.
I could not find Sherlock Holmes ducks like those. Could not. But I did find bigger ones. So those will be giveaway, ticket giveaways. Take it,
Sell
duck.
out.
Yeah.
And it's funny because on the website where you get it from, it says, these are not for the bathtub.
Wait a minute.
Okay. They are to put on a shelf, as Miss Ruiz does. And
We'll take a look at ours. It's like, what?
well, there's a hole in the bottom, so they don't float. They kind of float. The mead is in that brown bottle there. Just flop the top open. I mean, this will be much more enjoyable if you're all drunk. Just saying. Well, you'll all have to sleep here, so pajama party. I liked the mead to have the honey flavor and sweetness, because that was the joy of a mead.
Yeah.
But there, you can make dry meads. He's made dry meads before, but I think like, what's the
Why?
point? Why? Little sweetness, little effervescence. It's a happy thing.
Didn't have the amount of sugars and
Oh yeah,
things like that.
that's
we have.
expensive. Sugar was very expensive, so yeah, only rich people. That's why you have those things like puddings. They call puddings, like the Christmas pudding, it's just solid fruit, and dried fruits, because that's what they had by then, and all that stuff, the currants and raisins, and if you have apricots and nectarine, all that stuff is in there. It's just packed in there with honey if you had it,
Yeah.
but
Nothing
but
compared
it
to
just
today's.
but a lot of booze. So that's how they preserve themselves.
Got it. No, that's true too. Well, you didn't drink the water back then.
Well, you did. You had cisterns. You'd definitely not drink out of the Thames.
Yeah.
But if you're in London, there were various cisterns throughout
To get
the
the
town.
rainwater. Yeah.
It's a lot of water.